Welcome to The Explainer. This is the show where we take incredibly complex, fascinating topics and break them down into direct, easy-to-understand visual facts. Today, we're focusing our lens on a creature that has absolutely captivated human imagination for millennia. We're looking at elephants, Earth's ancient wanderers. These magnificent mammals aren't just known for their sheer, unbelievable size, but for an emotional and intellectual depth that genuinely rivals our own.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to take a sort of outside-in journey today. We'll start with Meet the Earth's Giants, moving into the anatomy of a titan. Then we'll go deeper into the elephant mind and look at matriarchs and their herds. After that, we'll cover the fight for survival, and we'll wrap it all up with an interactive elephant FAQ segment.
So, let's kick things off with Section 1, Meet the Earth's Giants, looking at the three species.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. It's a simple fact, but one that absolutely bears repeating. Elephants are the largest living land animals on our entire planet. But, they aren't just one monolith. They're actually three distinct recognized species walking the Earth today. You've got the African bush elephant, which is the absolute largest, roaming the savannas of sub-Saharan Africa. You can spot them by their massive ears and that two-fingered trunk tip. Then there's the African forest elephant. They're a bit smaller, a bit darker, perfectly adapted to the humid, dense forests of Central and West Africa. And finally, the Asian elephant, which features a more rounded back, noticeably smaller ears, and a trunk with just a single finger-like tip.
That brings us perfectly to Section 2, Anatomy of a Titan, exploring their marvels of biology.
Surviving as the largest land mammal requires some profound biological engineering. An adult African bush elephant can weigh roughly 6,000 kilograms. That is 6 tons, and they stand over 10 feet tall at the shoulder. So how does a biological frame actually support and operate that kind of mass? Well, consider this number, 40,000. That is the approximate number of muscles in a single elephant trunk. To put that into perspective for a second, you and I only have about 639 muscles in our entire body. The trunk is basically this incredible fusion of the nose and upper lip, and because of those 40,000 muscles, it's strong enough to literally uproot an entire tree, yet delicate and precise enough to pick up a single tiny blade of grass.
Beyond the trunk, the rest of their anatomy is equally wild. First, let's look at their skin. It's heavily wrinkled and about an inch or 2.5 centimeters thick. But those wrinkles aren't just there for show. Those folds act like a reservoir, retaining up to 10 times more water than flat skin would, which is an absolutely crucial cooling mechanism in the blistering savanna heat. Second, their bones. To physically support 6,000 kilograms, elephant bones actually lack the marrow cavities found in other mammals. This gives them incredibly dense, maximum structural strength. And finally, those iconic tusks. A lot of people think they're horns, but they aren't. They're actually elongated incisor teeth that just continuously grow throughout the elephant's entire life. They act as vital daily tools for digging, stripping bark off trees, and of course, for defense. Moving right along to Section 3, the elephant mind, diving into intelligence and emotion.
Now, these aren't just massive biological machines. They are deeply complex, feeling creatures. If their physical bodies are marvels of biology, their minds are absolute marvels of cognitive evolution. Let's start with how they communicate. Elephants use something called infrasound. These are deep, low-frequency rumbles that are actually entirely below the threshold of human hearing. We can't even hear them. But what is truly mind-blowing is how elephants receive these messages. These seismic vibrations travel right through the ground, and elephants can literally hear and detect them through the highly sensitive pads of their feet from up to 20 miles away. It's almost like texting a friend clear across the city, but doing it just by stomping your feet.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it turns out the old idiom, "an elephant never forgets," is actually rooted in hard science. Elephants possess a highly developed hippocampus and cerebral cortex, granting them a literal decades-long memory. They can remember precise, incredibly complex migration routes, recall the exact locations of distant watering holes during severe droughts, and even recognize individuals they haven't seen in years. On top of all that, they're one of the very few species on Earth capable of recognizing themselves in a mirror, which scientists consider a major indicator of high self-awareness.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Matriarchs and their herds, looking at the power of community. You see, that incredible intelligence isn't just kept in isolation. It forms the very foundation of one of the most complex social structures in the entire animal kingdom. Elephant societies are strictly matriarchal. When they're moving or bathing together, the group is always led by a matriarch, the oldest, largest, and most experienced female. She is essentially the living, breathing library for the herd. She holds all the vital survival knowledge. The females in their calves stay tightly knit in these family groups for life, fiercely protecting their young and their injured. The males, on the other hand, well, they typically leave the herd around 12 to 15 years of age to live either on their own or in smaller bachelor groups.
We come now to Section 5, the fight for survival, focusing on the conservation crisis.
Despite their immense power, strong social bonds, and high intelligence, elephant populations have declined sharply over the last century. The conservation situation across the board is highly precarious. As you can see, the African forest elephant is currently listed as critically endangered, which is primarily driven by severe habitat loss and poaching. Both the African bush elephant and the Asian elephant are listed as endangered. For the African species, the illegal poaching of their ivory tusks remains a devastating threat. For the Asian species, the massive expansion of human civilization into their natural habitats has led to an increase in deadly human-elephant conflict alongside severe habitat destruction. Conservation groups are currently engaged in extensive research and protection efforts to try and mitigate these exact threats.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our final segment, Section 6, Elephant FAQs, for some quick trivia. We've covered their biology, their minds, and their survival. Now let's test your knowledge with a rapid-fire sequence of 4 pretty surprising elephant facts.
All right, question 1. You and I, we have a dominant hand, right? So do you think elephants have a dominant side? Are they right or left-handed?
Well, the answer is yes, but we call it being left or right-tusked. Just like humans, they heavily favor one side. In fact, wildlife biologists can often tell which side an elephant favors just by looking at them. The dominant tusk is almost always shorter and slightly more blunted, just from the frequent wear and tear of daily digging and lifting.
Okay, question 2. Considering that an adult elephant can consume up to 300 pounds of vegetation and drink anywhere from 68 to 189 liters of water in a single day, how long do they actually find time to sleep?
Surprisingly, wild elephants only sleep for a tiny fraction of the day, only about 2 hours, and they often do it while standing up. They basically maintain a near-constant state of motion, needing to spend up to 18 hours a day simply feeding, just to sustain those massive bodies.
Moving to question 3. Human pregnancies are, roughly 9 months. Take a wild guess at the gestation period for the largest land mammal on Earth. The answer is 22 months. That is nearly 2 full years. It is literally the absolute longest gestation period of any land mammal on the planet. And when that calf is finally born, it arrives weighing roughly 200 pounds and is already standing 3 feet tall right out of the gate.
And here is our final question, and honestly, perhaps the most profound one of all. Do elephants really mourn their dead? Do they genuinely have a capacity for grief?
So the crucial point is, yes, they do. Elephants are one of the very, very few non-human species known to display deep empathy, true grief, and specific mourning behaviors. They have been regularly observed gently and silently touching the bones of deceased relatives with their sensitive trunks, actively pausing in their migrations to acknowledge the fallen. It is a hauntingly beautiful behavior, and it leaves us with a really powerful final thought for this explainer. What does it say about our own place in the natural world when we share the earth with a giant that remembers, communicates, cooperates, and mourns, exactly like we do? Thanks so much for tuning in and keep learning.